Welcome to episode 3 of the Carp Coach. You join me at home at Linear Fisheries and we're on Brasenose One. This episode is going to be a real in-depth look at zig fishing and spodding over the top of zigs, which is a question I get asked all of the time. No matter how many videos like you do and you see on zigging, people sort of really want to see how you go about spodding over zigs, what you use, the bait you're using, and sort of how often you're putting it out, because it's a lot of people, they don't really know sort of the times that you should be leaving it between each spod. So you can probably see behind, I've got a fishing net, which is a good fish, probably over 30 pounds, so it's a method for big fish as well. I've got another fish on, and the action has been absolutely hectic this morning. I think this is my 16th or 17th bite. That's just since 8 o'clock since I arrived. So I'm going to get this one in and we'll have a look through the tactics and the tackle. He's nearly ready. Go, another decent fish spodding over zigs. Let's have a look at him. Oh, there he is, 27.5 pound of zig caught Brasenose One mirror. This one come in a flurry of action, which is what can happen on the zigs, and as well it come with a couple of other fish sort of a similar size, which is again something that happens when you've got the bigger fish on you. You'll find that because these fish are shoal fish, that you will sort of get 4 or 5 quick bites of all sort of similar sizes. This one's 27, a 26, a 25, and the one that I've got in the net as well is quite a bit bigger than that. So we're going to slip this one back and we'll show you the bigger one. How about that for a proper Brasenose One unit? A lot of people say that zigging, spodding over zigs is a small fish method, but if you're fishing a venue like B1 that's got a lot of big fish in, the chances are you're probably going to hook into one. And at over 30 pound, this ain't no small fish. So I'm going to slip him back, hopefully get a few more bites, and run you through the tactics and the methods. One last little look at him. When it comes to what bait to use over zigs, you literally can use sort of whatever you want. You know, you can make it as expensive as you want, or you can make it as cheap as you want. This is the mix what I use. I'm not saying this is what you've got to use to catch fish, because there's loads of alternatives, but this is the mix what I use. So first things first, is your main base for your sloppy mix is a nice sort of powder. This is the Manila active mix. Add some water to it, creates a perfect slop, full of attractions, loads of different smells, and like I say, that's what I would use. But there's other alternatives, you know. You can use porridge oats, mix them with a load of water, they create a cloud, they go nice and sloppy and they sink slow. Any form of ground bait, you know, you can get cheap sort of like brown crumb, mix it again with water, that's good enough to use on its own. But as a base layer, that would be the first thing that I'd chuck in. So I'd probably put about half a bucket of that sort of straight in, and that is the start of the mix. Moving on, the liquid. This is krill liquid. Again, you can use whatever liquid you want. You're not looking to feed the fish up in the water, you're just there to make an area that's going to draw fish in, sort of disguise the fact that your zigs are there, that they're going to be swimming around sort of frantically trying to sort of compete with each other and hopefully picking up your hook bait. So you just want a maximum amount of flavour trickling through one area of the water column. So that's the liquid. Pellets, 2.3 mils these are, nice and small, they sink really slow. as they're in the bucket throughout the course of the day, they swell up, they leak off loads of attraction, loads of colours come out of these, and it just adds a different sort of aspect and a bit of a different sort of smell and taste to the bait. And as well, the heavier that they get, obviously when they take on a bit more water, they're starting to get to the bottom, so you are getting a little bit of bait down there for later on. Boilies, you know, probably wouldn't go with boilies for the whole, you know, the whole part of the day, because what's the point putting loads of boilies in when you're trying to catch the fish up off the bottom? But from sort of say 4 or 5 o'clock onwards, when it starts to cool off and you know you're looking to sort of get some bait in for the night, you want to be crunching up a few boilies and chucking them in there, maybe putting a few whole ones in, just so you are getting a little bit of bait past the column of fish down onto the bottom, which is where you'll be fishing throughout the course of the night. And then good old-fashioned sweet corn. I use boatloads of it anyway. I sort of think that the fish are so used to seeing it, there's bits and pieces falling throughout the water, you know, throughout the course of the day, because that's what you're spotting out. And by adding that in as well, you are getting bait down there onto the bottom, ready for the night. So good, always put a couple of cans of sweet corn in. And then finally, just good old-fashioned milk. This is fresh milk because I'm good like that to the fish, but you can use sort of like the long life milk, condensed milk, coconut milk. You tip it in the margin on its own, it clouds up, 50p for a pint, pour it straight in your spod mix. It just gets it a bit cloudier. As I'm saying, you're not looking to feed the fish up in the water, you are simply spodding over zigs to bring the fish up off the bottom and to create a feeding frenzy around your 2 zig hook baits. So I've now added all my ingredients into the bucket. Half of it, like I said, full up with a dry powder, 2 tins of sweet corn, a good helping of my 2.3mm pellets, my chosen liquid, so on this occasion I've got the cloudy krill in there, and a good old-fashioned pint of milk as well for an extra bit of cloud. Obviously, the liquid that I've put in there isn't enough to get it to the consistency that I want and need to be using it for zigging. So I'm literally just going to take it down to the water now, and I'm just going to sort of add water as I go. What you've got to remember as well is, because you're working with dry ingredients, that through the course of the day, you know, the active ingredients in the ground bait and stuff and the pellets, it is going to be taking on water. So you want to keep adding water throughout the course of the day. So if you make it sort of over sloppy, if you like, to start with, don't worry about it, because if you leave it for probably half an hour, you'll probably find that by the time that you go to use it, that the water will have absorbed in and you will have a nice sort of consistent sloppy mix. One thing that is worth mentioning is I see people using it extremely runny. Like, for me, that's not the sort of the effect that I want to create. A, because I just think it's messy. It goes all over your back. It goes all over the swim. There's just no need for it. And B, the area that I'm fishing in is 13 foot deep. If I make it too sloppy and too runny, it's literally just going to be covering sort of the top sort of foot to 2 foot of the water column. And you know, I want to be fishing all the way through there. As I said, I want to be getting bait to the bottom as well, have the option of fishing a lower down zig should I feel that, you know, maybe the fish have followed a bit of the bait down. So basically I just want it like a stodgy porridge, if you like, enough that I can scoop it into the spod, and when I lift the spod up, it isn't all going to be dripping out the bottom and all going over my back and all over the floor. So literally, as I've been talking there, this has absorbed a lot of the water that I put into it. So give it another little mix. Just gonna add a little bit more water, but you can see that it's quite firm. It's not, you know, it's not running out the bucket. Add a little bit more water in. Obviously, if you put too much water in, you can add a little bit more powder just to, you know, just to sort of stodge it back up again. And I'd normally, if I can, make it about half an hour to 45 minutes before I'm going to use it, because by that sort of time, most of the sort of the powders and, you know, crushed hemps or whatever you've got in your mix will have absorbed all the water. So then you can see sort of what you're working with. Give it another little mix up. Another good little tip is have a bucket of water next to where you're spodding, because you start getting it all over your hands, and that is nothing worse than sort of clogging up your reel, and you know, then you start wiping it down your clothes. And this little bait spoon is a perfect size to just sort of level fill it, tip it straight in the spod, and away you go. So as that is now, no, I mean that's just, we've just literally just made that up now, so it hasn't had real like time to soak in, but the consistency that I've made that is the consistency that I'd use. And as you can see, it doesn't run off the spoon, it just slops out, and as that's sort of falling through the water column, it'll probably be doing the same sort of thing. As it's going down, all the little bits and pieces will be breaking off, and you've got a stream of bait from the surface right the way down to the deck. So it basically gives you 13 foot of water, or whatever depth you're fishing, to fish for. And there it is, the sloppy spod. When it comes to spodding over zigs, one item of your tackle that is going to take an absolute hammering over your session is going to be your spodding setup. This is what I'm using today, Horizon X5 spod and marker rod, designed for the job, purpose built, will get the biggest of spods out there, no problem at all. Big pit reel, 12,000 EOS reel, loaded with 20 pound spod and marker braid with a 50 pound braided shock leader. And what you'll notice is that the braid on the spool isn't right to the lip. Now, with the fishing rods and your mono, yep, that's fine. You want it right to the lip because you're not going to get any wind knots or nothing like that with the mono on there, whereas braid is a completely different animal. If the spod skips along the surface too quick and you wind on a loose coil of line, you're going to get a wind knot. If it's not kept damp, you're going to get a wind knot. You're just going to get no ends of problems if you load this right up to the lip. So all I've done when spooling it up, just had my spare spool, backed it up, made sure that it's just a fraction below the lip, and then when I come to reverse it, I know that it's going to be absolutely perfect. And then when you want to re-spool, obviously you can take it back down to the knot, and then you can put your new braid on, so you're never going to have to change the backing. Again, keeping it wet. If the braid's dry, when you let the spod go, you're going to get a clump of line come off, you're going to have crack offs, you're going to leave line out in the lake, and it's just a disaster, and it just will put you off your session and it will just do your head in. Believe me, I've had it happen quite a lot before. 50 pound braided shock leader. This is exactly the same leader as what I use on my fishing rods. And again, another little thing that some people might find, think I'm crazy. It's the same leader and the same leader material that I use on them, because when you're picking up the rod, you want it to sort of everything feel the same, because if things start feeling different, you're going to be inconsistent with your casting, dropping them short, so on and so forth. So the more you can do in your favour to make everything flow consistently, the better. On the end, nice big loop with my little tag end there that you've seen before, that you can quickly change between spods or lead if you want to sort of have a little lead around and maybe find another spot. This is the large impact spod. You can use the medium one. The medium one, obviously, if you was getting a little bit tired, you could put the medium on because it's not going to be as heavy, it's not going to hold as much bait. Or if you find that the fish aren't responding as you feel they should to the spod, you can put a smaller one on to reduce the noise when it goes in. But for me, the big one, I can load it up with bait and I can fire a load of bait in. Which brings me on to how much bait to put out. It's sort of one of them really. Obviously I'm not going to know the venue what you're going to be taking this tactic to, so it's hard to say you should start with this amount, but this is what I would start on a place like Brasenose One. You've got a lot of fish in here. This method in particular works well where there is a lot of carp present, because you're trying to create the feeding frenzy and the competition, and you're not going to be able to do that on a low stock pit, whereas places like B1, you've got loads of fish in here, they're going to be competing, and obviously the more bait you put into them, the more fish that you're going to get competing in your swim. So once the bait's made up, the rods are clipped up, I'll probably start with 20 to 25 big ones. Purely and simply because it gets a lot of bait out there, it gets a lot of bait falling through the column, and it sort of makes an area for the fish to hone in on, rather than, if you're trying to pull fish off the people either side of you or the people opposite you, you want your bait to be established and then to stand out. One thing I would say when it comes to the spodding is always spod to a clock. I know that might sound crazy and it might seem a lot of hard work, but believe me, once you put your initial amount of bait out, if you sit back in your chair and think, I'll put a couple more out in 5 minutes, 5 minutes soon becomes 10, 15, 20 minutes, and before you know it, the bait you've put out is on the bottom, over and done with. Your spot's sort of been deactivated, if you like, and then you're going to have to put a lot more bait in to get the fish back there. But by keep putting them in, so today I started with 20, 25 big spods, set the stopwatch for 5 minutes, then I put another 2 out. Didn't have a bite straight away, it took a little bit of time to get a bite. After another 5 minutes, put another 5 spods out, and I just sort of like upped the bait until I got the first bite. Obviously it's hard, every day is going to be different, conditions are going to change a lot. Like if it's flat calm, they don't tend to work, it doesn't tend to work as well. Why my theory is that they can see a lot more, whereas the ripple breaks it up and it gets the bait moving and it moves the zigs. But by working to a clock, you can soon establish a pattern. And if you find that you've put 4 spods out after 5 minutes and you've had a bite, by the time you put the fish back and you put another 4 spods out after 5 minutes, once you've sort of established a bit of a pattern, the fishing can sort of sorts itself out. And it's worth writing that sort of information down, because if you do start catching like that, when you go next time, you know exactly where to start, how many to put out, what colours have been working, and basically it just makes you consistent throughout your zigging. Okay, let's fire a couple out. Use my little spoon, you don't want it all over your hands. Don't want to fill it right to the brim. Look at that, no mess, that's what we like. One thing worth mentioning as well is a finger stool. If you're spodding without one of these, you're crazy, because on numerous occasions I've seen it where it's slipped. You know, people think they got the clutch done up nice and tight, slipped. The minute you got a cut on that finger, like if you've had it happen, you'll know it's so painful. It doesn't matter how many finger stools or plasters you put on, you simply will not be spodding anymore. So line myself up, exactly what I would do if I was fishing, you know, picking a spot to fish for the night. I've picked a visual horizon marker in the distance. It does help because there's a couple of bivvies over there already, so the chances are if they have a light on at night, it will make it easier, but directly behind them there's a dip in the horizon. One thing I should say is this spot that I've been fishing throughout the day, I will fish it at night as well. You know, it seems completely pointless to put a boatload of bait out during the day and then not fish on it at night. Okay, some of it will have been eaten, but there will always be elements of bait that have got to the bottom, and certainly when you start introducing the larger items towards the evening, you will find that a lot of it gets to the bottom. And if you start putting it out and then you change spots, you're asking the fish to feed in 2 areas, and what we're trying to do is to get them to compete in 1 area. So let's fire this out. Line myself up over the head, and there we go. Bent into another one now, and what you'll probably notice is I'm playing the fish with the rod quite low to the water. Couple of things really, it keeps them coming in a straight line. A lot of the matchmen do it, the feeder boys, and if you ever watch them, you'll see that they put the tip in the water and they just wind, and it pretty much keeps the fish in a dead straight line. You haven't really got a great deal of room in any of these pegs, so the last thing you want to be doing is wiping everyone out. And then you can see that when they're coming towards you, you can just put some gentle pressure on there, and provided your clutch is set, if they do take a bit of line, you know, you're ready for it. And as well, I'm not sort of hooking the fish to sort of lose the lead. I don't want to be losing the lead. There's not a lot of weed present, tiny little bit in the margins which I can get above anyway. So by keeping the rod nice and low, you know, the lead is, if it's staying on, it's just not going to be swinging around. You're just sort of using the water and the resistance of the water to hold the lead as still as possible. And obviously, if you are hooking fish on sort of 8, 9, 10, 11 foot zigs, you want to use everything to your advantage to get the fish in. So like I say, I'm not fishing them so they come off every time, but they are set, you know, on the slick leg clips set up. So if they do come into a bit of weed, or if the take's quite aggressive, then the lead can come off. You know, it's completely safe, but I don't want to be losing them every fish if I don't have to. And as well, what you'll notice, I've only got 2 rods out. This type of fishing can be proper hectic, you know, double takes, triple takes if you're choosing to fish with 3, but if you're fishing with 3 rods on zigs on one spot, and if you hook one on your middle rod, if it kites either side, you're going to wipe a rod out, whereas if you've only got 2 out, you've got a 50-50 chance whether you're going to wipe it out. So always just keep the 3rd rod ready to rock and roll. As soon as the fish is in the net, I can literally make sure it's secure, up the bank, get the other rod out, and you're fishing, and then you can deal with the fish that you've got. But for now, I'm going to focus on getting this one in. To me, this one looks like the lead's has actually popped off, but on the others that I've had, you know, I've not had any need to drop the lead, so don't think that you have to drop the lead, because unless it's mega weedy, really you just don't have to. Another thing as well, what I do, I'll always wear a loud fish with a braided shock leader. A, it eliminates cracking off if you're consistently casting, and B, when the fish are in the margins and there is any weed there, you have got that little bit of extra sort of pulling power to get them out of it. But what I do is probably a little bit different, and you know, most people sort of just overlook, you know, the reason, you know, there's more reasons to a shock leader than just to take the shock out, is I'll actually fish it. So I've got 5 turns on my reel handle, and I know then that where the lead's positioned is enough that I can net the fish. So if I am playing the fish with the rod under the water like this, and you know, you can't see where the fish is, so if you're playing them at night and you don't want to put your head torch on, as soon as I know that the shock leader's on the reel and I've got 5 turns on, I know that if I can pick the rod up, that fish then is within netting distance. So, you know, there is more to a shock leader than obviously just, you know, for casting purposes. Just any little things like that to use to your advantage does just make things that little bit easier. So you're sort of like, you know, you don't really have to pay as much attention as what's going on with the fish, because all you're waiting for is for the shock leader to come through, you know, to come through the rod. Yeah, if you was doing like zigging at night, because zigs are as effective, you know, if not more effective at certain times of the year at night. And if you're catching a lot of fish, you know, and you forget your head torch, or you know, whatever, you're one of them that doesn't like putting their head torch on when they're playing fish, sometimes you've got no indication as to where the fish is in the water. So literally by having a shock leader on, once it comes onto the rod, you know, and 5 turns onto your reel, you know then that fish is within reaching distance. So just a good little indicator. The lead's come off on this one, so it's probably a bit of a twitchy take. Like I say, I'm not fishing to sort of jam the lead on so they never come off. I'm fishing them so if they do come into any trouble or I get an aggressive take, they can come off. There's no weed, the only bit of weed is just what we've got in front of us here, but I'm stood out over that anyway. Looks like another nice fish, another 20-pounder. Little slick off the spot. Obviously out there having it. There he is. Another B1 zig victim. More spot. More spot. There we go. Another stunning Brasenose One mirror carp. Again, spotting over zigs, and now we've sort of hit the centre point of the day. Not a great deal's happening, is what I've found when zigging. The middle part of the day is pretty pants, but keep drumming a few spots in every now and again is enough to keep the odd fish coming. So I'm going to slip this one back and get prepared, and hopefully the evening proper kicks off. When it comes to choosing a colour to use on your zig, really you can experiment. There's no you should be using this colour because that's the right colour to be using, or you shouldn't be using that colour. Chop and change them all around. You know, you can use a yellow band, black foam. Sometimes a little fleck of colour off of a band is enough, or a solid colour is enough. You know, you can literally choose whatever you want to do. Sometimes you might pick a completely random colour, but that could be the colour what goes. As you can see on my zig disc here, 3 colours, 3 solid colours, yellow, red and black. All of my zig discs prior to the session are filled up, so you can get 15 zigs pre-tied. The venues that I'm going to, normally I know the depth of them. If I don't, I'll tie them to say 15, 16 foot, because the likelihood of you using them in deeper water than that probably is quite minimal. So if they're 15 foot deep, say for argument's sake, which is what all of these are, when I get to the lake and I've marked it up, then I know that I can chop these down. There's nothing worse than tying them all too short, only to find out that you're either going to have to re-tie them all, which is just an absolute nightmare. So they're the 3 colours that I've got on there. These 3, probably my favourite 3. Certainly my 3 favourite band colours, and I chop and change the foam in between them. Black, I'll use black if I'm fishing high up in the water. So say for argument's sake on B1, like where I am now, the water's 14 foot deep in front of where I am. If I'm fishing 10 foot and above, I'll use black. And the reason for this is because it silhouettes so well. Even if you're spotting a cloud, if you're leaving it say 5-minute intervals between spotting, if you've got black, it's still silhouetting up in the upper layers. So if the fish are swimming underneath and they look up, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Red's just an absolutely brilliant colour. A lot of maggots have gone in these lakes over the years. They're not allowed to be spotted out now on here, but for some reason, a single red zigger liner over a baited area, maybe they see red as a slightly different colour underwater, who knows, but red seems to really work, and I found it works the best when the cloud comes over. So this session, you know, we've had constant sunshine, so there's been really no need to chop and change and put reds on because the black's been going. But when the cloud comes over, by putting a red on, for some reason it just seems to keep them bites coming. And then lastly, the yellow. Solid yellow, got a yellow liner, yellow piece of foam. I would use this, and I religiously use this for sort of midway fishing, mid-depth. So if I'm fishing anywhere between 6 and 8 foot and below, I'll use a yellow. I'll never ever use a black low down. It's what I'm confident in. I just don't like using a black any further than sort of 3-4 foot below the surface. Yeah, maybe you can get away with red, but for me, because of the amount of sweet corn that's gone into the mix, putting a yellow on, I just think it mimics a piece of sweet corn as best as you can. Obviously, you know, the fish aren't seeing that as a natural source of bait like they are the sweet corn, but that there mimics it. And a 6 footer is very good if you've spotted and you're leaving it maybe a little bit longer, because what it does is it gives the bait chance to sort of fall through the water. They've got a 6 foot Zigs anchored there, and then if the fish are coming past them, they might swipe at them just because it's like, you know, what's that? It could be a piece of corn that hasn't quite got to the bottom yet. So for me, they're my 3 go-to Zig colours: red, black and yellow. One question I get asked all the time is, what depth Zig do you start with? And it's one of them questions that it's very, very hard to answer, because you've got to go with what conditions you've got on the day, how many fish are in front of you, where you think they're going to be. Again, similar with the colour choice, it's completely down to you where you start. You know, if you spoke to a few people and they've told you a depth, then yeah, go for that depth and try it. What I always like to do, certainly when I'm like spodding over them, is I'll always start them high up in the water, because for obvious reasons, if you've tied a load of zigs up and you go chopping them all down, it's harder to extend them up than what it is to cut a long one down. So me personally, I will probably start sometimes with maybe 3 rods on the spot, because you know maybe you're gonna have an issue with wiping another rod out with 3 on there. But if you can just have that extra rod with a different length zig, that might be the one that gives the game away and lets you know where the fish are. So normally I would start, again for argument's sake, the situation I'm in now, 14 foot of water, 2 up around the 10 and 11 foot mark, and then 1 sort of mid depth, say 6-7 foot. When you're spodding over them, the fish aren't, as a rule, they're not always like up in the upper layers, which is where a lot of people believe as soon as the spod hits the water, the fish are sort of 3 foot below it. That's not the case. You know, when it's quieting down here, going lower down, sometimes the fish, even though they're used to the spod going in and the bait trickling in, they sort of know that the danger area is higher up. So by coming lower down, they don't associate that area with danger, so they drop down into, say, the middle band of water. But when it comes to starting with zigs, you want 1 sort of mid-depth and then a couple a little bit higher up, and then you can just gauge it from there really. So for argument's sake here, started off 2 sort of 10.5 footers. The reason I started at that is because I spoke to a couple of lads that were here, they had caught on 10 footers, and as a coincidence I chucked mine out and I literally caught straight away. But one thing I would say is every time you chuck a zig out, you measure the depth of it, because it can be so important. If you catch a fish on a zig and then, I don't know, say your line gets frayed or whatever, you cut it up, put it in the bin, and then you go to tie another zig, even say 4 to 6 inches out, that can be the difference between catching and not catching. So before you chuck them out, you want to make sure that every single one of your zigs is measured and you know the exact measurement, because if you have a disaster, you want to be able to retie a zig to that exact same depth, chuck it back out there, because the chances are once the fish are confident in a layer, that's where they're going to stay and that's where you're going to get the bites from. 6 foot yellow. Well, no sooner had I just put that fish back, I've received another take, this time on my right hand rod, What I was saying about the middle of the day and it quietening down, it's actually a really good time to sort of start chopping and changing your depths and your colours. You know, if you're getting consistent action on one sort of depth and colour, then you've got no need to change. But this middle area of the day can be quite pants. So by ringing the changes, it certainly can bring the extra, you know, the extra 1 or 2 bites that, you know, that you're looking for. It's about 13 foot out where I am. I've been catching on 10.5 footers. And this sort of, I've had quite a lot of fish sort of on the area, and when I'm spodding out and chucking my leads in amongst it, you sort of can actually feel that sometimes you are getting like a double drop, which is where it's going over fish as the lead's going through the water. It happened about half an hour before I caught that last fish. I sort of guesstimated the fish to be about sort of 4 to 7 foot off the bottom, so straight in with a 6 foot, changed the colour to yellow. I've got a bit of corn in my mix, just more so like as the day's pushing on now, starting to add a bit of heavier stuff into the mix, trying to get bits and pieces down there for the night. And like I say, yeah, this one was on a yellow 6 foot. No, I just sort of think the fish swim by and they just think it's a, you know, a little bit that's not made it to the deck, and unless you're constantly drumming the spot into them, or you know, you've got a bit of a pattern where you're putting, say, I don't know, 5 to 7 spods out every 5 or so minutes, then the fish haven't really got any need to come up in the water. They're going to sort of hover around where they feel safe, which is normally mid-depth. So what I'll do now, sort of for the next half an hour, maybe an hour, is bring the other rod in and match it exactly the same as this and see if there's any sort of pattern. But for now, I'll focus on getting this one in and yeah, sort it out in a minute. This is too scaly for me. I should just jab this one off here at the net. Look at that, look. It's got 6 scales in the middle of it. Another one bites the dust. It's actually a really nice fish. I've persevered with the Zigs for the rest of the afternoon and into the early evening, chopping and changing depths and colours, carrying on spodding over them, and nothing's happened. The fish have probably just moved off. There's a load of fish in here. They move around in a big shoal. They could have just easily pushed 20-30 yards away, and if they don't want to have it, they simply won't have it. So now's as good a time as any to start putting the bottom bait rigs out. Literally, I've unlooped my leg clip set up. I fished the Zigs on a naked setup, so there's no leader or nothing behind that can get caught, no leg or leader or submerged leader that can get caught. Loop to loop, some 360s on with little pink pop-ups. I'm literally going to fire them back over the top. From previous experience, spodding over Zigs doesn't work at night. I've tried it, it just doesn't work for whatever reason, I do not know. But having said that, chucking single Zigs out can be just as prolific as actually fishing down on the deck. You know, you can get multiple bites on single Zigs just chucked out in the middle of nowhere all the way through the night. But for now, I'm going to chuck these 3 out, put a little bit more bait out, because even though I haven't had a bite, you know, you might have missed what depth they're at and they might have still wiped you out, so it's always worth topping up a little bit more. But fire these out, put a few more spods out, and I think we'll get the barbecue on. about 5:30 in the morning now. Nothing happened through the night on the bottom. Probably in hindsight, maybe should have left Zigs out, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. I didn't leave him out, and as a consequence, I had a good night's sleep, which I suppose isn't a bad thing. Wound them in, got back on the Zigs, 10 foot, which is the depth I was catching most of the fish on yesterday. Straight back out there, and I'm going to jump on a spod. One thing I would say that's always a bit of an advantage when you're spodding over Zigs is if you're up before a majority of the anglers on the lake, I found if you start spodding first before they start, the fish seem to hone in on the first bit of bait was put out. So I think there's been one other bloke down the other end spodding so far, so hopefully by me getting the first sort of amount of bait out, that the action's going to start up again. I mean, I got here yesterday about 8 o'clock, which is obviously 3 hours on from now, so this could be potentially a really, really good time of the morning. So I'm going to fill it up, I'm going to fire a few out there and see what happens. I'm going to run you through now how to tie up a Zig rig. My preferred choice is a Zig liner. Basically, you get absolutely brilliant hook holds with the coloured band, so whatever colour you're using, you know, red, white, black, yellow, you can change the foam, and it's so easy to do. So you can wind it in, whip the piece of foam out, change it over, no baiting needles involved, and you're back fishing again. So not only do they save time, they also give you fantastic hook holds as well. First things first, the Zig and Floater hook link itself, and as you'll notice, £15. Now, I see people going down to like £6–8 line. I think it's absolutely barbaric, and that is the reason that lakes all up and down the country have fish that are trailing Zigs around, because that is stupidly light line for fishing for big carp. So £15 line, people say they're wary. You're creating a cloud up in the water of bait. The fish have let their guard down. They really don't care less what it's tied out of, provided that hook bait is suspended right where you want it to be. So £15 Zig and Floater. Another good thing with the Zig liners is you don't have to reel off all your line like if you was tying a conventional Zig and then obviously having to do your knotless knot. With a Zig liner, everything stays on the spool and you can work from basically the Zig liner up to the hook and then measuring off your length at the end. Cutting off the end with a pair of scissors, and on the sort of liner end of the Zig liner there's a tiny little hole, and if you poke the mono in it, it will find the hole, shoot through, and it will come out up on the banded end. Again, Zig and Floater hooks, size 6. Big hook, you're still fishing for the same fish that you would be if you was fishing on the bottom. This time you're just fishing from on a Zig. And you know, as you'd have already seen, you're planning to fish with a lead on. You could have sort of 8, 10, 12, 15 foot of hook link behind that. And if you've got a lead spinning around and you've got a tiny little hook on the end, all you're going to do is suffer hook pulls. So do want to maximise your chances of converting every bite into a fish in the net. Size 6 hook, get one out of the packet, razor sharp. Then to attach it, couldn't be any simpler. I see people doing sort of knotless knots and then pulling it, or they're tying like a 5-turn grinner at the top. By doing that, you're just creating a kink above the eye of the hook, and if you're doing that, it's going to offset your Zig and it's going to sit funny in the water. So, in through the eye of the hook, pull about 4 to 5 inches back through, then poke it back through the eye of the hook, so then effectively your hook is sat on a loop. Pinch the loop down nice and tight, and then simply do an overhand knot, passing the loop back through like so. So now your hook is on is on the knot, and you've got your little loop sticking out the bottom end. And then all you're going to do is simply bring the large loop back over the hook, dampen it down, and then at the same time pull both of the ends nice and tight. Get it between your teeth, and you can give it a nice pull down, nice and tight. And that will never ever come undone, and you'll be able to pull fish through weed and have no worries about ever having that parting. Trim the tag end. Now, getting the Zig liner onto the hook itself. I have people say to me they have no end of issues trying to pull them on. And the reason that they do that is because what they do is they hold the line in one hand, they hold the band of the zigger liner, and they yank it. And all that's going to do is it's going to split the zigger liner. You've got to remember the eye of the hook, yes, it is bigger than the internal bore of the zigger liner, but because of what they're made out of, dampen it down, nice bit of tension, slide it on, it'll expand and then it'll contract back over and your zigger liner's not going anywhere. So all you're doing, just dampening down the eye of the hook, sort of forming, I just did like a bit of a figure of eight just around my finger with the line, so you're pulling nice and tight against the knot. Pinch the zigger liner with 2 fingers and you're literally just sliding it on. No need to force it, nice and gently, and you want to leave 2 to 3 mil off the end of it. And another good thing with the knot where it is you'll see there that that's dead straight. So at the minute there's no real aggressive angle on the hook, it's just as it would be, I suppose, if you were using just a conventional hair rig setup. But with the knot there, you can literally tweak it down like so, and that gives you a nice aggressive angle there. So if anything comes into contact with this, that little angle there will nail the fish every single time. Then comes to the hook bait. So you've got your loading tool and your foam. I've gone for yellow on yellow this time, but you could do yellow and black, yellow and red, you know, the options are endless. Place it in the tool, literally dampen the end of the tool just so it slides through the rubber band a lot easier. And again, don't yank it through, because the chances are you're going to either snap the band or you're going to end up just pulling it through, and it's going to take you a few times to get the piece of foam in there. Hold in the end of the loading tool on the foam. You're literally trying to slide the band up off the end of the loading tool onto the foam, and then you'll see you've got a couple of mil out there. So all I like to do then is literally just pinch the foam, twist it, and you can push it through. And I like to have mine set so I've got foam equal sides of the band, so I don't want a little bit of foam that side and then sort of 3 times the length that side. I want it half and half. So all I'll do, spin it, twisting at the same time, and then once I'm happy with how much I've got through, so normally I'll go just sort of level with the eye of the hook, take a pair of scissors and I'll sort of match that length there to this side here, and then a little bit of OCD, literally I just trim round and make it more rounded on the edges. I don't know why, it's just something I do and something I've got confidence in doing. And that there is exactly how I would tie a zigger liner. And all you've got to do then is take this, measure it off to your desired length, chop it off, slide on your anti-tangle sleeve, figure of 8 loop in the end, on the quick clip, and you're ready to go. What a textbook start. Put the rods out, 10 spods back over the zigs to sort of activate the area again, left it for 10 minutes, went back, tied a few more zigs up, and come back down 2 more spods. As I'm winding in the second spod, it's away. You know, it just shows the importance of getting up early and making an extra bit of effort when everyone else is still in bed, because by getting my bait out now, hopefully I can establish them fish into one area and capitalise on it whilst everyone's still sleeping and not doing anything. And hopefully by that time they're so confident in the area that I'm baiting that they don't move anywhere. So I'll focus on getting this fish in. As soon as he's in the net, jump back on the spod and make sure them fish stay there, hopefully for a little bit of early morning clubbing. Well, that's the first bite of the morning in the bag. Looks to be a sort of scaly mid to upper double. Literally just going to pop the hook out now, secure the net and get the rod back straight back out there if he behaves himself. Stab him in the mud. rod out. Bite number 2 of the morning now. Literally, unhook that fish, chuck the rod back out, put another 3 spods out, and just as I was sort of clipping the spod back into the back up into the rest, ready to deal with the fish, it's gone again. So it just shows the importance of quickly getting the rod back out and a bit of bait back over the top. The lead pops off of this one, which makes it a little bit easier to land. Obviously, I've got a 4-ounce lead trailing around. Still just keeping the rod nice and low. Oh, a good old scrap, and they've actually just started showing over the air as well, which is a really good sign. I'm only fishing the 2 rods, so I've only just got 1 rod left out. But this was the sort of time, it's coming up for what, 7 o'clock now, so it was about this time yesterday that I could sort of come through the gates. So an hour on from now is when I started fishing. So if it's anything like yesterday, I'm going to make the most of this morning period and sort of get the most out of the peg. I'll get this one in, and again just repeat the same process, and hopefully we can keep the bites coming. Ready to go now. Oh yes, it's a better fish. That'll do. Right, let's unhook him. When it comes to zigging, my preferred lead arrangement setup is just a standard lead clip. Obviously got my braided shock leader on there, got my big loop on the end so I can chop and change between this. Also if I was using a submerged or a lead core leader of any type when I'm fishing on the bottom. When it comes to zigging, normal lead clip. Tail rubber, lead clip, quick change swivel, put the pin straight through the lead clip, job done. If you've got any form of leader, tubing behind, it's something that's heavier than the zig itself. So as it's going through the air and it's waving, potentially the zig can wrap around it. So by fishing it like this with an extra large anti-tangle sleeve, bar if you're not hitting the clip or they're just charging in, this setup here is 100% tangle proof. You know, I get 0 problems with this, and I have confidence chucking it out in the middle of the night when obviously I can't see as it's flying through the air if there's any separation. Provided it's hit the clip or I feathered it down, I know this setup isn't going to tangle. And what you'd have probably seen as well is when I'm playing fish, you'll see them that they're coming in with the lead still on. You don't have to drop the lead every time. It's just completely not necessary. Certainly when you're fishing places where you're spotting over zigs and you are getting a lot of bites, you know, you don't want to be dropping a lead every time. They're not cheap. The way that this is set up, the lead clips, the tail rubber's pushed on the lead clip halfway. So if it does come into any sort of, snag or weed or whatever, then obviously the lead can eject, or if you get a violent take, the lead's going to eject. Having said that, if you're fishing a lake with a bit of weed and you are finding that maybe the lead staying on is causing you a bit of a problem, or you're fishing for bigger fish, then yeah, I would just nick the tail rubber on and you'd make sure that the lead's ejected every time. But for me, fishing a zig like that is 100% tangle proof. When it comes to casting a zig, it really couldn't be any simpler. All you've got to think about is it's just like casting a single hook bait. You've got no bag attached, there's no extra weight, all it is a long hook link. A lot of the questions I get asked is, where do you put the hook? Basically, the long and the short of it is, provided the ground's quite clean, so even though here we've got gravel, I'll literally just chuck the rig onto the floor. It might sound a little bit barbaric, and I've been doing it for years and years, and I honestly do not believe that I've ever had a hook go over because it's hooked a piece of gravel as it goes out. It's nigh on impossible. The hook is leaving the floor so fast that it doesn't even have time to touch a piece of gravel. So all I do before I chuck out, flick it onto the gravel, make sure everything's clear behind me, and then I'll be ready for chucking. If there is leaves behind or a bit of debris on the floor, whatever, I will probably put a mat down. Obviously a mat without sides, because if you've got sides in it, it's something for the line to drape over and therefore something to hook into. Or if you haven't got that, you can just pop it into a cup. But obviously you've got to be a little bit careful when you swing the rod around, because it might pop out of the cup and then obviously onto the floor. Another thing is the drop for the lead. Now I see a lot of people think just because they got a long hook link, they can wind the lead right up near the tip eye to cast. Obviously that's not the right thing. You wouldn't be doing that if you was chucking out normally. So I always have a 6 foot long drop down to the spigot. I can get a nice pendulum on the lead when I chuck it out. It means the zig's up and away from me and it's completely out of danger. So I'll have it 6 foot like I've got set up now. I'll flick the zig out, open the bail arm, then I'll spin around so I can see that the lead hasn't moved and pulled the hook along the gravel or pulled it out of a cup or whatever. Once I'm all set, literally just line up the cast, chuck it out, And another big thing with a zig is if you're fishing to a spot, make sure it hits the clip, and if you're chucking them out just randomly, make sure you feather them before they hit the water. You want to stop the lead so the hook link throws itself behind to eliminate tangles 100%. And you'll see on here as well, I've got the XL anti-tangle sleeve as well, and it just keeps the sort of the bottom end of the hook link, if you like, the bit closest to the lead, as far away from any danger as possible. And that is how I would go about chucking a zig out. Another fine Brasenose One mirror carp, pretty much exactly the same time as yesterday morning. The bites started, they came thick and fast. Kept topping the spot up, 2-3 spods sort of every 5 minutes was enough to keep the bites coming. And yeah, this is one of a number of fish that I've had this morning already. Obviously we can't show you them all because there's quite a few of them, but yeah, certainly keeping that bait going in, chopping and changing has certainly kept the bites coming. And I think this B1 chunk just about rounds off what has been an absolutely brilliant session spodding over zigs. You know, it just goes to show that if you're willing to chop and change your depths, change your colours, keep the bait going in, work into the clock, that you too can get out there and smash a load of fish out on zigs as well.